Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this channel. Here we inform, we educate, and we share knowledge amongst each other. This is a channel that has an objective of just informing the public about things they should know and just bringing down the conversations that are being had at a very high level for a common man to at least have an understanding of what is happening. Now, remember to subscribe, remember to like, remember to share, so that other Kenyans can also know what you now know. And it's important that we update each other. Now, today we are going to speak about a very, very important topic. The Kenyan government, you have been seeing it in all the media platforms, that the Kenyan government is in a mess when it comes to public debt. Of course, the Kenyan government represents Kenyans. So if the Kenyan government is in a mess, then we are all in a mess. And this is the reason. Kenya has a debt profile of 10 trillion Kenya shillings. It owes investors, other countries, a total of 10 trillion Kenya shillings. And to break down that figure, 4.5 of that is from domestic debt and 5.1 is external. So 4.5 is domestic, but you know very well that domestic is being borrowed where it is being borrowed from the financial markets and from the money markets. Yeah. Now, as you all know, even the domestic borrowing is not entirely domestic in terms of not only Kenyans have provided that money to the government. In the financial markets, there is the profile, so many other nationalities are there, so many other investors from outside have invested in the financial markets of Kenya. And as such, even whatever you call domestic borrowing is not really domestic as in coming from Kenyans. It just means that it has been borrowed from the local financial markets, but the investors behind our financial markets could be coming from wherever. So 84% of the domestic borrowing is coming from bonds, that is debt. For people who don't know what bonds are, these are long-term debt instruments. Yeah. So, and long-term debt instruments, they come with a higher risk and of course higher returns for the investors. And that means that the obligation of the Kenyan government to the investors is higher. Yeah. And 14% of it comes from the treasury bills. Treasury bills are the short-term borrowings that we do as Kenyans and investors. 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and all that. Less than a year. And then, of course, we have the final one. 2% of it comes from overdraft. Can you imagine? The Kenyan government also borrows from the CBK. So it has an overdraft of around 2% of its debt structure. Yeah. Now let's come back home. So if the Kenyan government then owes people around 10 trillion, you will believe then that it's making so much money for it to be able to service that kind of debt. But the reality is here. Kenya government collects around 2.2 trillion annually from Kenya Revenue Authority. That is the highest actually they have done in the recent past. So if you are collecting 2.2 trillion, but you have a debt of 10 trillion, is like this. That is 4.5 times. The debt is 4.5 times the income. Yeah. I will use a local example so that we can all understand. Imagine a Kenyan earning 100,000 Kenya shillings. A maximum amount the bank can be able to give that person is around 1.2 million because it covers the maximum period of around 5 years. That is 60 months. Now, the bank cannot make a mistake of giving that person 5.4 million because his income cannot service that. But that is a reality now, guys. The Kenyan government has a debt that is 4.5 times its income. And when you look at how much it is paying on an annual basis, the Kenyan government pays around 223 billion in principal repayments. So when you're paying the principal amount, it's 223 billion every year. That means for the amount of debt that we have right now, we can only manage to complete it in 45 years' time. So we are bonded for 45 years to the debt that we have right now. Now, that is not enough because remember, loans have interests. And the interest side of our loans are the most significant. The Kenyan government is paying 770 billion in interest repayments every year. And that is why you hear the president complaining about these interests, because they are not favorable. Yeah. So when you take 770 billion and you add 230 billion, together they are almost a trillion. So every single year, the Kenyan government services 1 trillion Kenya shillings on debt alone. And remember, they only collect 2.2. So take an example of the same gentleman earning 100,000, but 50,000 goes into repaying debt and income and interest. It is not sustainable. And that is why now the Kenyan president decided to take this route. Number one, he has said the debt route is not sustainable. We cannot continue borrowing, because the more we continue borrowing, this situation will not go away anytime soon, and we will be bonded. And remember, when you're bonded to debt, you become like a slave. And who is financing you? The people who are financing you will then take control of you, and they can do whatever it is that they want to do with you. So what has President Ruto done? In his first budget, which was read this year, he has increased his budgeted repayment for principal from 223 billion as it is to around 475 billion. So he has doubled that amount. Ruto wants to finish these principles as early as possible. Of course, he will not manage to do it within his presidency, even if he does 10 years. So that means instead of 45 years, we will only be able to complete that in 21 years. Still a long time, but that is his strategy. Now, if you're going now to increase amount you're repaying as principal, where are you going to get that money? Now, what is happening right now, Kenya is borrowing. Kenya has a deficit budget, guys. So a deficit budget means whatever it is that you're budgeting, you don't have that money. So it means your expenses are more than your income. So whatever the difference, the government of Kenya has been going out to borrow again. So the Kenyan government has been borrowing it around 900 billion. So imagine, guys, you are paying around 1 trillion in principal and interest. But again, you go out and borrow around 900 billion. So it means that problem is just repeating itself and continuously repeating itself. That's why the only solution to that problem, William Ruto has said, is that he has to end that cycle. And the only way of ending that cycle is fast-tracking the process of repaying the principal, but again, reducing borrowing. Now, when you reduce borrowing, and yet borrowing is one of the ways in which our government gets is income. Whenever they fall short, they normally go and borrow. So which other way would then the government have to meet its day-to-day expenses? It has to now go back to the one route that we all know, taxes. Remember, the Kenyan government makes money only through taxes, through grants, and through borrowing. And when you lock the borrowing route because you want to completely remove that problem from Kenyans, then you are remaining with two things, grant and taxes. Now, grants are a very small component of the Kenyan government income. They don't make a significant difference. Now, taxes is where William Ruto has decided to die with it, because he's saying, Kenyans, you will have to be part of the process of freeing yourself from this bondage. Because if you are not able to give him the money through taxes, he will go back again to borrowing, and this situation will not go away. And that is why, if you ask me honestly, there are only two options. That's why I said it's between a rock and a hard place. You either continue borrowing, and that cycle continues for a very long time, and you cede your control to the person who is giving you the money, or you try as much as possible to find ways in which you can make that money locally through taxes. Now, taxes are not entirely harmful if they are within range. I will produce another episode where I'm going to tell you why even though Kenyans are complaining, and I understand, you'll be surprised that the Kenyan tax rate as it is right now, it's not yet optimum. That means that so many Kenyans are avoiding taxes, and which is illegal, but they are avoiding it. And that's why the Kenyan government cannot entirely meet its tax objectives or the revenue targets. And I will explain that another time. But for now, just know that our debt is 10 trillion. Our repayment is around 1 trillion every year. And out of what the government of Kenya makes of 2.2 trillion, it only remains with 1.2 trillion to serve its, to now carry on with its day-to-day activities. And that is why a significant amount of that 1.2 trillion goes into recurrent expenditure, and the small amount that remains goes into development. And I think the current president has already promised you that development budget was slashed because he doesn't see where that money will come from. Yeah. So as you go out there, just know that is the summary of how our debt looks like. It's not a very good outlook, but if you are to be put in the same scenario as the president of Kenya right now, I will definitely make the same choices. So thank you very much, guys. I will produce more. This topic is very expansive, and there will be more episodes for me to just delve even deeper. Thank you very much, and I look forward to more engagement, and I look forward to you sharing and informing people about what you now know.